My name is Jake, just a regular guy from the south side of Chicago. A neighborhood kid who's always loved being out on the streets, at the farmers markets, the flea markets on weekends. Ever since I was little, I loved walking through the vendor stalls, watching sellers set up their carts, hearing them holler to pull in customers, the smell of BBQ mixing with the sweet scent of funnel cake. That's my life. Simple. Every day. The kind that moves to the rhythm of the L train and the hot dog stand on the corner. I work as a delivery driver for a small family food business. It's not the most glamorous job, but it pays the bills and leaves me time to cruise through the neighborhoods, watch people. Sometimes, when I'm feeling lonely, I like to stop at the street food spots and grab a cheesesteak or some loaded fries. The street has always been my refuge. It was a Friday night. The day had been exhausting. One of those where it feels like the city wrings you out and leaves you dry. The heat was suffocating, the kind that has you sweating from the first hour of the morning, and the traffic was absolutely unbearable. My last deliveries had been a disaster. 2 customers complained the food arrived cold. 1 more said items were missing. And to top it all off, my bike broke down right in the middle of the expressway. So I decided to unwind a little. I left the bike at the shop and walked over to one of my favorite spots in the Pilsen neighborhood. The stand was right on the corner of a dim little side street, wedged between a 7-Eleven and a small corner grocery store. It was run by Lou and his wife, Irma, for over 15 years. They made the best loaded sandwiches in the neighborhood, or at least that's what I always thought. When I got there was already a short line. The smell of seasoned grilled meat hit me in the face, and hunger came rushing in. "Hey Jake, the usual?" Lou called out, greeting me while skillfully working the grill. "You know it, Lou. Make it crispy," I said with a smile, leaning against the makeshift counter of the stand. I sat down on one of those plastic stools that wobble if you don't position them just right on the pavement. While waiting for my sandwich, I watched the street come alive at night. Young couples, factory workers heading home, a couple of drunks stumbling in the distance, all with the same destination: the food stands that lit up the streets with their flickering bulbs. Everything seemed calm, a night like any other, until I saw them show up. 2 young guys, the kind you can tell right away are looking for trouble. One had short hair and was covered in tattoos, his tight t-shirt showing even more ink up his arms. The other was a bit stockier, with a hardened face, scars that made it clear this wasn't his first time mixed up in a fight. They walked slowly, looking down with contempt at everyone sitting on the stools around the stand. "What can I get you fellas?" Lou asked in his usual friendly voice, though you could sense the tension in it. "2 sandwiches and a cold beer," answered the more tattooed one without even glancing at him. Lou got to work, though he kept watching them out of the corner of his eye. Irma stayed quiet, as if she sensed something was about to happen. I kept eating my sandwich, but from the corner of my eye, I tracked every move those 2 made. One of the guys, the stocky one, started kicking the empty stools. He did it like he didn't care who was watching. First one, then another. The women sitting near the stand began exchanging nervous glances. Murmurs started rising, but no one said anything out loud. When Lou handed them their sandwiches, the more tattooed one stared at his, like something was wrong. "What the hell is this?" he growled, throwing the sandwich on the ground. I said, "Crispy, old man." Lou's eyes narrowed, but he kept his composure. "I can make you another one, son. No problem," he replied, trying to stay in control. "You calling me a liar?" the stocky one pressed, moving closer to the grill. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. I could feel everyone around starting to gather their things, getting ready to leave, but nobody dared move fast. We all knew what was coming. "I didn't say that, son. Just that if you don't like it, I'll make you another," Lou said. But this time, his voice trembled slightly. The stocky guy stared at him for a second, then spat on the ground near Lou's feet. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I couldn't stay quiet watching them intimidate a man who was just doing his job. I stood up from the stool, leaving half my sandwich on the counter. "All right, that's enough, man," I said out loud, without thinking too hard about it. Both guys turned toward me. I felt the weight of their stares, and for a moment, I second-guessed whether I'd done the right thing. The tattooed one smiled, a mocking, mean-spirited grin. "And who are you, tough guy? You got a problem?" he said, taking a step toward me. The stocky one moved to his side, crossing his arms. I felt my stomach tighten, but I wasn't going to back down. The street in that moment was quieter than I'd ever felt it. "Leave Lou alone. He's just doing his job," I replied, keeping my voice steady. The stocky one let out a dry laugh. "Oh, I get it now. You're the neighborhood hero, huh?" he said, taking another step toward me. "There's always some fool who wants to play the tough guy." Before I could react, the tattooed one shoved me hard, sending me stumbling backwards. I felt the edge of a stool in my back and barely kept from hitting the ground. My heart was pounding, cold sweat running down my forehead. But something in me, maybe the anger, maybe the pride, made me straighten back up. "I'm warning you. Stay out of things that don't concern you," the tattooed one snapped, now just inches from my face. The stand's lights flickered above us, shadows stretching long across the pavement. The few customers still around watched the scene carefully, but nobody moved. It was only a matter of seconds before things exploded. I felt the first punch hit my jaw before I could even process it. Fast and hard, like a thunderclap. The tattooed one had hit me with a closed fist straight to the left side of my face. I stepped back a couple of paces, the pain spreading through my head. But I didn't go down. I clenched my teeth, raised my fists instinctively, knowing I was now in a much bigger problem than I'd imagined. The stocky one tried to rush me, but I dodged his swing, stumbling to one side. My hands weren't a fighter's hands, but I threw a couple of punches at the tattooed one, grazing his cheek. Not enough to put him down, but enough to make him furious. "Stop it! Stop!" Lou shouted from behind the grill, but nobody listened. The tattooed one came at me again, this time landing a blow to my stomach. I felt the air rush out of my lungs, but instead of going down, I grabbed his shirt and shoved him back hard. We both hit the ground, rolling between the stools and tables of the stand. I heard someone scream in the distance, maybe one of the women, or a vendor from a nearby stall. But in that moment, everything narrowed down to the fight. We got up, both staggering, both breathing hard. My body ached and I was exhausted, but I knew I couldn't give up now. Not when these guys had humiliated Lou and wrecked whatever little peace I had that night. The stocky one charged at me again, but this time I slipped his rush and caught him with an elbow to the back. He dropped to the ground with a grunt, and the tattooed one, seeing that, stepped back, sizing up whether it was worth continuing. Right at that moment, the sound of sirens cut through the air, bouncing off the buildings and rolling in like an echo from the main avenue. Everyone froze, locked in a second that felt eternal. Red and blue lights began lighting up the area, reflecting off the tables and the vendor carts. My breathing was still ragged, and the pain in my jaw was getting sharper with every second. But I knew those guys were about to make a move. The tattooed one and his stocky buddy exchanged glances, knowing their time was running out. This wasn't their first rodeo with trouble. That much was obvious. And with the squad cars so close, they knew they couldn't stick around much longer. The tattooed one spat on the ground and threw me one last look, loaded with hatred, but also resignation. "See you around, hero," he growled, spinning around fast. Both guys sprinted into the darkness of the nearest alley, disappearing into the shadows before the patrol cars even turned the corner. I stood there, panting and holding my side, feeling the adrenaline slowly drain away as reality came crashing back. "You okay, Jake?" Lou asked, stepping toward me with concern in his eyes, his voice softer than before. I nodded, even though deep down I knew I was pretty banged up. There was a sharp, stabbing pain in my stomach, definitely from the stocky one's punch, and my jaw ached with every word I tried to get out. Yeah, I'm good, Lou," I replied, trying to hold myself steady. "It was nothing." Right at that moment, a squad car pulled up in front of the stand, and 2 officers stepped out. One of them walked toward us with a serious look, while the other started scanning the area, as if expecting to spot the guys who'd taken off. "What happened here?" the officer asked, looking at my bruises and the small crowd that had gathered around the stand. Lou started explaining the situation with the kind of calm that only years of living in a city like this can give you. I stayed quiet, still trying to process how fast everything had escalated. The officer who'd been checking the area came back and shook his head. "No sign of the ones who ran," he said. "Can anyone give a description of the aggressors?" Several of the customers started talking at once, describing the guys who'd started the whole mess. Even though I didn't have much hope they'd be caught, I felt a wave of relief, knowing I hadn't been left standing alone. The city, as hard as it is, has a strange way of pulling people together when things go sideways. After a few more minutes of questions and exchanges between the officers, they finally said their goodbyes, promising to patrol the area more frequently. The sound of the squad car fading into the distance was left behind, and life at the street food stands slowly started picking back up. Some of the customers who'd scattered when the fight broke out trickled back, and the grills began crackling under the flames again. I dropped onto one of the stools, exhausted, while Lou came over with a cold bottle of water. "Here, this'll do you good," he said, handing it to me with a kind smile. "Thanks, Lou. Sorry about all this. I didn't want to bring more trouble," I answered, taking the bottle and bringing it to my lips, letting the water wash away the dryness in my throat. Lou shook his head, Don't worry about it, son. Sometimes this is just how it goes. People like that are always looking for a fight," he said, bending down to pick up the knocked-over stools. "I appreciate what you did, but next time, don't go putting yourself in harm's way. It's not worth it." I nodded, even though deep down I knew I didn't regret stepping in. I couldn't have just sat there watching those guys try to humiliate a man who was only doing his job. Sometimes the street teaches you hard lessons, and that night, I'd learned one of them. Pilsen isn't the safest neighborhood. I know that. But it's also home. It's where I grew up, where I've seen the worst and the best this city has to offer. And even though the fights, the problems, and the injustice are always lurking, there are also moments when people come together, when neighbors look out for each other. And that night, as the smell of seasoned grilled meat filled the air again, and the customers picked their conversations back up, I realized that in spite of everything, this city was still mine. Lou offered me another sandwich, on the house this time. I ate it slowly, savoring every bite, feeling my body start to finally unwind. I knew the pain in my jaw and my stomach was going to stick around for a few days. But I also knew that at the end of the day, I'd done the right thing. That night, walking home along the same streets I'd walked 100 times before, the wind blew a little cooler, and the noise of the city felt a little more distant. Maybe I'd be back at the stand tomorrow, maybe not. But one thing was certain. No matter how tough the streets got, they would always be where I belonged, with everything good and bad that came with that. When I got back to my building, I climbed the stairs slowly, feeling every step as a reminder of that night's fight. I let myself fall onto the bed, and as I closed my eyes, I knew it wouldn't be the last time I'd face something like this. In a city like this, trouble is always right around the corner, but so are the small victories, the knowing smiles, and the warmth of realizing you're not alone. And with that, I drifted off to sleep, ready to face whatever came next. My name is Danny, and I've been working as a street sweeper in Chicago for over 10 years. It's not an easy job, and it's definitely not a clean one. But it's the only one I've got, and it's how I keep my family afloat. Every day, from the early hours of the morning until well into the night, I cover the city's streets, sweeping up the trash that seems to multiply with every step I take. I like the streets at those hours, when most people are still asleep and the noise of the city dies down, at least a little. The streetlights cast a dim, yellowish glow over the alleys that makes everything look calmer than it really is. My route takes me through several markets and street food stalls. That's where the garbage piles up the most. Greasy wrappers, soggy cardboard boxes soaked from the rain, scraps of food that fall from customers' plates. I've seen all kinds of things out on those streets, from drunk brawls to thieves trying to slip away in the dark. But what bothers me most, what really turns my stomach, is the rats. The sheer number of rats I'd seen running between the stalls. The first time I noticed the problem was a few months back, on a particularly hot night. I was sweeping near one of the most popular hot dog and BBQ stands in the area, a spot known for its loaded sandwiches and seasoned meats. The street was packed with people, families, couples, and groups of friends, all devouring food under the flickering lights of the stands. While I was gathering up a pile of dirty napkins, something at the edge of my vision made me stop. It was fast, barely a flash in the shadows, but I saw it clearly. A fat, gray rat darting across the street at full speed, heading straight for the pile of trash stacked up behind the food stand. I didn't think much of it at the time. I figured it was normal to spot a rat or two every now and then. After all, we were in one of the busiest parts of the city. But that same night, as I finished my shift and headed home, I saw more of them. They moved between the stalls like they were part of the scenery, slipping under the tables and gnawing at the food scraps that had fallen to the ground. The worst part was when I saw one leap onto a half-open box of burger buns right next to a vendor who was still preparing food. The guy didn't even flinch. He looked like he was used to it. That image stayed with me, and every night from then on, I couldn't stop noticing just how many rats there were around the stands. They started showing up in more places, and not just near the markets. I'd see them crossing the avenues, hiding between the trash bags piled up on corners, running along the electrical wires that stretched across the street. It was like the city belonged to them instead of us. One day, while I was sweeping the sidewalk next to a food cart, I saw a group of rats fighting over a piece of chicken someone had thrown out. They were big, bigger than they should have been, with thick tails dragging along the dirty ground. The people nearby didn't even notice. Everyone was so focused on their food and their conversations that the rats moved among them without anyone catching on. I stood still, watching them fight over the scraps until the biggest one grabbed the piece and disappeared into the nearest drain. From that night on, I started wondering how it was possible that nobody else seemed to notice. I was seeing more and more rats all the time, and the worst part was that they were getting closer and closer to the food. One thing is seeing a rat prowling around on an empty street. Another thing entirely is watching them stroll between the tables and around customers' feet while nobody does a thing. And I couldn't help thinking about what else they might be doing once the stands closed and everyone went home. On one particularly dark night, I decided to stay after my shift. I'd finished sweeping, but something inside me said I needed to look into this more. The stands were already closing up, and the vendors were starting to clean their grills and fold up the tables. I hid in a nearby alley, tucked into the shadows, watching in silence. It didn't take long to see what I'd suspected all this time. The moment the vendors walked away and the street went quiet, the rats started coming out. At first, it was just a few, but soon I watched them multiply. They poured out of the drains, out of cracks in the walls, and from underneath the vendors' carts. They moved fast, like a well-organized army, heading straight for the food stands. They jumped on top of food boxes the vendors had left on the ground, gnawed at leftover bread on the grills, and sniffed through the meat scraps in the trays. I stood frozen, watching the rats take over the place. Within minutes, the street that had been full of people just a little while ago had turned into a hunting ground for these animals. And then I saw it. One of the stands that had closed early had a small gap in the tarp covering its frame. A fat rat, gray, with dirty, matted fur, leaped inside. My heart sped up as I watched it vanish between the stand's tables. I didn't dare move. afraid any sound would alert them to my presence. The streetlights flickered, and I felt sweat running down my forehead. The rats kept scurrying everywhere. And then I noticed something else moving. In the distance, through the dim light, a figure appeared. It was a man, dressed in worn, dirty clothes, walking slowly toward the stands. He seemed to be in no hurry, like he was completely at home in this scene. I watched him approach one of the stalls, the very one the rats had overrun, and he stopped there, observing in silence, just like me. The man crouched down slowly, and with an unsettling calmness, grabbed one of the rats by the tail. He lifted it into the air and held it up in front of his face, as if inspecting it. The rat twisted and writhed, trying to break free, but the man didn't let go. Instead, he started walking toward the inside of the stand, taking the rat with him. I couldn't see what he did next. The shadows swallowed him up, but the sound of something metal hitting the floor made me shudder. I stayed there for what felt like an eternity, watching the rats keep moving between the stalls and the man disappear into the darkness. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to run and put as much distance between myself and that place as possible. But another part, one I barely understood, told me to stay, that I had to see how far this all went. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, the rats disappeared again, slipping back into the drains and the dark corners. The man never came back. The vendors started arriving, opening up their stands and getting ready for another day of work, completely unaware of what had happened while they slept. I left in silence, with a knot in my stomach, and a sense of unease I couldn't shake off. The next day, I tried to forget the whole thing. I swept the streets like always, pretending nothing had happened. But every time I saw a rat dart around a corner or slip between the stalls, I couldn't stop thinking about the man who'd held one up in the air like it was his. Ever since then, every time I walk past that street, I make sure to look twice. My name is Ray, and for as long as I can remember, I've worked the streets. I grew up in a working-class neighborhood on the west side of Chicago, where most people made their living through small-time commerce. Flea markets, corner sales, hustle of every kind. My dad sold bootleg CDs, and my mom made tamales we'd sell outside the schools on weekday mornings. So when I finished high school, I knew which way my path ran. I was going to work the street stands too. There was no other option. A steady, secure job was for other people, for the ones who went to college. But for me, life meant standing behind a cart or a grill, selling whatever people wanted to buy. After bouncing between jobs for a few years, I ended up at a carnitas stand on the corner of a busy street in the Humboldt Park neighborhood. The stand, Chino's Meats, was famous for its flavor, but also for the explosive temper of the owner. Big Art. The man had a reputation in the neighborhood. The food was excellent, but if you crossed him or messed with his stand, you'd better be ready for a tongue lashing, or worse, a public dressing down that left you shaking. He was one of those guys who believed success was built on the fear he inspired in everyone around him. When I showed up to work for him, I knew what I was walking into. It was no secret. Every previous employee had lasted a short time, and customers would joke with nervous laughs that working for Big Art was like walking on broken glass. But I needed the job. I had dropped out years ago. And even though I'd tried my luck elsewhere, I knew the money at a meat stand was steady. So head down and a quiet good morning, I showed up at the stand on a Monday morning. "You the new guy?" Big Art asked, without even looking up from the grill, where the pork was sizzling in its own fat. "Yes, sir. They told me I started today," I answered, trying to sound confident, even though the truth was the man intimidated me. "Don't call me sir. I'm not your father," he said bluntly, turning to look at me for the first time. His dark eyes cut right through me, like he was sizing up how long I'd last before I broke. "Start chopping onions. We don't have all day." I got to work immediately. The pace at the stand was frantic. From the moment we opened at 8 in the morning until we closed around 3 in the afternoon, there wasn't a single moment to breathe. Customers came in waves. Office workers, laborers, neighbors, and even the occasional cop. Everyone wanted their food as fast as possible, and Big Art, with his seasoned hands, cranked it out in the blink of an eye. The carnitas dropped onto fresh tortillas, and the plates flew toward the customers, crowding around the small stainless steel cart. I was nothing more than a grunt in that chaos, chopping onions, wiping down the makeshift tables set up with planks and plastic chairs, and running back and forth to keep the stand in order. All of it while absorbing Big Art's constant yelling. It didn't matter how fast I worked. There was always something wrong. If the salsa wasn't blended right, if the plates weren't clean to his liking, or if I took 5 extra seconds on something he considered simple, there was his voice, booming in my ears. "Move it, Ray. What? Am I paying you to stand there like a statue?" He'd shout, not caring that customers were just a few feet away. The humiliation was constant, but the worst part wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. He made sure everyone around could hear. Every dressing down came with the stares of the customers, some with a mix of pity and amusement, others pretending they hadn't heard a thing. More than once, a regular customer would try to ease the tension with an awkward smile or a light comment. But Big Art wasn't the type to let things go. To him, every mistake was a personal insult. That was my life for the first few weeks at Chino's Meats. Every morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach, knowing I'd have to face Big Art and whatever mood he was in. And every night, when I finally dragged myself home, exhausted, hands sore from all that onion chopping, I thought about quitting. But the money was good, better than anywhere else I'd worked. And that's what kept me there, grinding through the shouting and the heavy atmosphere. Despite everything, I started learning the craft. Between one outburst and the next, I realized that even though Big Art was a tyrant, he knew his business cold. He knew exactly how to cut the meat so it stayed juicy, when to skim the fat off the grill, and how to prepare the hot pepper sauce that kept people coming back again and again. He was a master of controlled chaos, but that didn't make him a good boss. One day, I showed up at the stand and found him angrier than usual. Before I even got close, I could hear his voice booming louder than normal. He was going off on Beto, the other guy who worked with me. Beto, who'd been there longer than I had made the mistake of showing up late, something Big Art had zero tolerance for. "You think you're something special, Beto? That you can just waltz in whenever you feel like it," Big Art was hollering, his face red with fury. "We're not here to wait around for your highness to show up." Beto, a guy who'd always been patient and calm, was trying to apologize, but Big Art's shouting gave him no room to get a word in. "Save your apologies," Big Art roared, slamming the grill with the ladle he used to serve the meat. "You're late one more time. You're out. I don't need you here if you can't be responsible." That morning, the atmosphere at the stand was more charged than ever. Beto worked in silence, head down, and I, who normally tried to stay out of the line of fire, could feel that something was about to blow. And it did, just past noon, when the stand was packed with customers. One of them stepped up to the counter and ordered 3 plates. Big Art, still in a foul mood from the morning, started putting the order together. But in his rush, he didn't notice he'd served burnt meat. When the customer realized it, he pushed the plate back. "Excuse me, but this is burnt. Could you redo the order?" he asked politely. It was like someone had flipped a switch in Big Art's brain. "Burnt?" he exclaimed, his voice climbing. "If you don't like my food, you can take yourself somewhere else. We're not here to coddle you. You understand me?" The customer, a young guy with a look of pure disbelief, tried to calm him down, but that only made things worse. Big Art moved toward the counter with his fists clenched and let loose at full volume. "Don't come in here telling me how to do my job. I've been doing this for 30 years. You don't know a damn thing." The other customers watched the scene unfold, some uncomfortable, others trying to hide their nervous laughs. And it was right at that moment that Beto, who had been absorbing Big Art's anger all day long, hit his limit. He set down the knife he'd been chopping onions with and turned to face him.